Soon after the sun reaches its summer solstice, a quiet Alaskan river hosts one of nature's most iconic scenes. Hundreds of thousands of salmon surge upstream from the ocean to this river and beyond. They're guided by an instinct to spawn at their birthplace or die trying. About 60 miles from the ocean, they'll encounter a waterfall where they are greeted by some of the world's largest predators. Brown bears intuit the incoming tsunami of fish. They arrive motivated by the profound hunger that comes only after months of hibernation. Between June and October, Brooks River in Katmai National Park hosts one of the greatest gatherings of wildlife in North America, and you can watch it all on explore.org. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Bearcam 2022, brought to you by explore.org, the Katmai Conservancy, and Katmai National Park. I'm Mike Fitz, your resident naturalist with explore.org. And joining me to discuss the upcoming Bearcam season are my co-hosts, Kim Grossman, Chris Kliesrath, and Lian park rangers at Katmai. Rangers, it's great to have you as part of the webcam experience this summer. And before we get into the details of the Bearcam experience, can you please tell us a little bit about yourselves and where you are? It sounds a little bit windy there. So Kim, maybe let's start with you.
So I'm Kim, and I will be one of the media rangers here at Katmai this summer.
Hey, I'm Chris. I'm one of the other media ranger here this summer. This will be my third season, and I'm looking forward to talking everything bear with everyone.
And I'm Lian. I am the visual information specialist here at Katmai, and right now we are standing at one of the platforms along the river, and so that's why you might hear some wind noise. We definitely have a little bit of a windy day here. A nice day, but we are outdoors. But Mike, could you tell us a little bit more about exactly where here is?
Yeah, throughout our conversation today, we're going to highlight some of the stories of the bears and salmon that you can follow this season. And toward the end of the chat, we'll also discuss some tips for visiting Brooks Camp in person. And but first, as you said, Lian, let's take a closer look at the geography of the area. So let me take everyone on a quick tour of Brooks River, because Brooks River and the Bearcams are located about 300 miles southwest of Anchorage, Alaska, in the west central portion of Katmai National Park. And we'll see if we can cue up a little video here to show us exactly where that is. And the river itself is fairly small. It's only about 1.5 miles long, and in this view, it flows from left to right. Brooks Falls is located at about the river's halfway mark. Along with our webcam partner, the National Park Service, explore.org hosts and maintains several webcams at Brooks River, and the signal from the Bearcams is relayed to 2 repeaters on Dumpling Mountain, and those repeaters then send the signal to the small town of King Salmon and the park headquarters area, which is about 30 miles to the west. At almost 4.1 million acres in size, Katmai National Park and Preserve is larger than any national park in the contiguous 48 states. Yet in the minds of many, Brooks River, where the rangers are standing right now, is the heart of the park. In July, we might see dozens of bears fishing for salmon right there. Kim, can you talk about why the salmon are so important to bears?
Oh, definitely. Thank you, Mike. Bears are all about food. So in order to hibernate for the winter, bears need to eat one entire food in a short 6-month span. Other foods they can get are going to be vegetation like berries or grasses, but those expend a lot more energy to go forage for. So going to where the concentrated food source will be, such as the salmon when they all come here, is going to be best for their energy to get their calories in for the winter time. As we see the bears out fishing this summer, high abundance of salmon, we may see the bear eat only parts of the fish and cast the we call high grading. So bears innately know which are the fattiest part of the salmon, which are going to be the brain, the skin, and the eggs. And so they will go ahead and take those fattiest part, the nutrition and the calories in, and then they will cast the rest away so that way they can keep more space in their stomach for more food. Another reason why salmon is so important to the bears for hibernation is also for reproduction purposes. Our female bears, if they weigh less than 25%, won't be able to sustain a pregnancy. So if we want to see more little spring cubs this year, we want these fatter bears. So here in Katmai, we not only have larger bears, but we also have higher rates of reproduction in them as well. Chris, can you tell us also how the salmon benefit the ecosystem here in Katmai?
Absolutely, Kim. It turns out that the salmon are actually a keystone species, which means they make major contributions to the Brooks Falls area and the ecosystem. They add nitrogen and carbon as energy to the water. Believe it or not, they're not the only ones who eat the salmon. The larger fish in the
Oh, and our Wi-Fi signal, I think maybe at Brooks River is dropping just periodically, so that's okay. We'll get the Rangers back here in just a moment. But I think Chris was, of course, talking about the importance of salmon to the ecosystem, and you can't really overstate the importance of salmon to the Katmai region and the Bristol Bay region overall. Not only does it support some of the highest densities of bears in the world, but a nearly continuous human history at Brooks River going back the last 5,000 years. Brooks River is
that gives us some denser vegetation and faster growing trees, which in turn will also shade the river, making the spawning more productive as it cools the water a little. So overall, they do make a major contribution. The decomposing salmon, which you would think would be useless, is actually carried into the forest as well and consumed by the smaller bears at the falls and downriver, and also feeds the birds and smaller mammals. So that's pretty much how important they are to the ecosystem. Lian, can you tell us what to expect in numbers?
Absolutely. I don't know if we dropped a little bit there. I think we had maybe a little bit of connection
just a little
issues,
bit,
but just a little bit? Okay. Hopefully we're back. The things of working remotely. So when talking about salmon, forecasting is inherently difficult. But what things I can say is that the Bristol Bay area has one of the healthiest salmon runs in the world. And so the Alaska Department of Fish and Game actually carefully tracks and monitors escapement, but they also provide a prediction for the year. And as of right now, they are predicting a pretty strong salmon run. We're talking about 75 million sockeye salmon returning to the Bristol Bay area. And when you look back on perhaps the 10-year average, right, this is significantly higher. So the past 10-year average is over 52 million sockeye salmon or close to that number. So when they're forecasting 75 million, we are talking a pretty strong run. And fingers crossed, that is what we're going to see. In previous years, we have seen salmon basically bank to bank in the river, almost so much so that you can walk across the water on the salmon. And already this season, we've seen a few enter the river. Not the big numbers that we'll see pretty soon, but they are starting to swim upstream here. But Mike, can you talk a little bit about, not this year perhaps, but looking back on previous years, what kind of trends we are seeing?
The Bristol Bay salmon run is really the last great run of salmon on Earth. And like you said, over the past several years, we've really been seeing some exceptional runs of fish. And a lot of those go into Brooks River. But the run itself is kind of changing. That's one of the stories I think we can follow this summer. How will the run compare to what we have seen on average in the past? Over the last few decades, and especially in the last 10 years, there have been some notable changes in Bristol Bay's sockeye run. One change that's hard to see on the cams, but the Bears probably realize this at some level, is that the salmon are trending smaller overall. Their average body size in Alaska, and this is talking about all species of salmon in Alaska, has declined over several decades, especially during the last 10 years. And notably, there was a dramatic dip in the size of Bristol Bay salmon last year. So in 2021, looking at some of the statistics I was able to find, the average sockeye size at the processing plants in Bristol Bay, where the commercial fishery is, was about 4.5 pounds. So that's smaller than the more than 5 pound average the previous year. And why that is, no one's quite sure yet, but scientists have some pretty good hypotheses. The fish, all salmon in Alaska, including Bristol Bay sockeye, seem to be getting smaller primarily because they're returning to reproduce at a younger age than in the past. So it's not the result of like the commercial salmon fishery catching all the big fish, for example. There seems to be other things going on there. And we needn't really worry that the salmon will shrink to some body size where they can't, swim upstream, where they're too small for other bears and wildlife to target. Salmon still need to have the size and the strength to meet the demands of upstream migration and spawning. And then there's also some evidence that the timing of the sockeye run is shifting later in the year. And that's something I know that rangers have saw last year. And it's new to me because historically, sort of like July 4 has been about the peak of the run of salmon in Bristol Bay. But in recent years, we've seen a lot of fish enter Naknek Lake and Brooks River in late July and even August. Now, is that the product of a shift in the salmon run timing or just a result of extra large salmon runs returning to the area? I'm really not sure. But last summer, there definitely appeared to be relatively few sockeye in Brooks River in early July, and then the run really picked up towards later in the year. Of course, a driving influence on all of this is climate change. The huge salmon runs in Bristol Bay are an example. The slightly warmer freshwater conditions might have increased survival and growth for juvenile sockeye in recent years. But we have to be conscious that we can, and we currently are in the process of forcing the climate to warm further, pushing really the atmosphere to a point where it hasn't been in millions of years. This century, the climate might reach a tipping point beyond which the salmon in Bristol Bay could suffer from conditions that are too warm. And that's already a fact of life for salmon in other parts of North America, especially the west coast of the US and British Columbia. So Brooks River sockeye show us why these fish are worth saving and what we have to gain in areas where salmon used to be more abundant. We're certainly living in uncertain times in a lot of ways. And while salmon face uncertainty every day of their lives, the sockeye that return offer hope even in the midst of great change. And we're going to talk a lot more about salmon, their amazing lives and importance to Katmai and Bristol Bay and other live events this summer. But Lian, although the salmon might bring bears to Brooks River, the bears themselves are sort of like the highlight of the cams in so many ways. They showcase their own amazing stories. And we've already been seeing some stories materialize on the cams this year, especially with a few family groups.
Absolutely. It's a new season here at Brooks, which means new bear stories to explore, old ones to follow up on and continue. The new season is always like, who's going to come back? Who's going to come back with spring cubs? What cubs are going to become sub-adults? And we've already seen several return to Brooks River. 132 and her two were just seen recently. 128, 909. And let's talk a little bit about a couple of these family groups. I'd like to start off a little bit with 909 first. I know, let's see. She was pretty present throughout the river last year and on the cams as well. And she was a first-time mom. So she's actually pretty young, right? She was 5 years old. And so normally we don't see bears having their first litter for maybe a couple more years. So she was really navigating that challenge. She was also, at the start of the season, she had 2 spring cubs, but by July, she only had 1. And really that is a testament to the challenges that bears here face and all over. That cub mortality rate is really high, but she was navigating this and she did really well along the river. And we would often see her fishing at the falls with her cub in tow, either treed or on the bank, or even the cub would follow her right out into the river. And she has returned already this season with her now yearling. And even though we don't have that many fish here, we've already seen her find success on the river. So she is going to be a really interesting one to continue and see how she navigates the river again this year. And another bear that we would be remiss if we did not talk about is 128 Grazer. She was on the river a lot last year with her too, and she is really assertive and often quite defensive when she has cubs. But this disposition really allows her access to some of her prime fishing areas. And one of those is the lip of the falls, which we can see right there. And not only was she exceptionally successful there, but her cubs also found success on the lip as well. And it's really interesting because we don't normally see cubs of that age being able to fish that location. So it is pretty impressive when you think of their age and what they're already learning from mom. And what's really interesting is this year she has returned with those two who were then yearlings. So if they stay with her, it's going to be a third summer. And here at Brooks Camp, bears usually tend to stay together as a family for 2 summers, though occasionally we do have some bears who will stay together as a family for 3 years. Bears like 708 and 94 do make a habit of keeping their cubs for a third summer, but it's not something that we typically see or have seen from 128 with past litters. And so if they do wind up staying together as a family this summer, they are going to be a force to be reckoned with, essentially. They almost form their own little family gang. So it'll be really interesting to see their place in the river this year if that happens. So we're just gonna wait and follow those storylines for sure. But cubs don't stay cubs forever. Unfortunately, they do have to grow up as much as we might like them to stay small, and they do transition to that sub-adult phase. Chris, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So usually subadults are described as between 2 and 4 years old, which means it's possible they've just been separated from their mom, in which we've seen them stay pretty close together for a while, such as in the case of 708s that were separated earlier this year. Some of the bears are going to be a little older, basically going through their teenage years. They've been known to be playing a bit mischievous. They do play together. Sometimes you'll see them in company of an unrelated sub, chasing each other, wrestling, just generally learning to fish on their own. This is to allow them to gain the skills they'll need later on to deal with other bears on the river and see how it works out. They can be quite difficult as they're still growing to identify, and some have some unique characteristics and behaviors. For example, 164, he has found himself a nice fishing spot at the base of the falls in front of the jacuzzi. No one seems to mind him being there, and apparently he's been quite successful, so I would expect to see him there again this summer. Another one would be 903, known as Gully. Apparently he's obtained or acquired a taste for gulls, and so he's been seen to consume them at both the river and on the beach. So it takes a while, and then they'll figure out exactly where they fit into the hierarchy on the river. Speaking of hierarchy, Kim, can you enlighten us as to hierarchy?
Definitely. Hierarchy plays a huge part in the world of bears. It not only helps determine which bears get the best fishing spots, but also which one have mating opportunities. So as far as the hierarchy goes, it also helps minimize conflicts amongst bears. So any of the smaller or less dominant bears will actually yield resources and opportunities to the larger, more dominant bears. How does a bear know its rank, though, in its hierarchy? Dominance can be established through any sort of interaction between bears. Bears will show through their posture, or they'll give off scent, or they'll give off vocalizations to let another bear know. And also, the hierarchy is very fluid, so it can change from year to year and even within the season itself. Hierarchy is also going to change based off the size of a bear, its age, its health, etc. So there are many factors at play that will make the shifting of our bear's rank go up and down throughout the season. Some of the bears for us to watch this year are going to be 151, 32, 503, and of course 747, and 856. 151, we've continually see him be one of the most dominant bears throughout the last couple of years as he has matured. He used to be very playful with 503 and with 32, but as he's matured, he started to prioritize food more so over play. As far as buddies, 32 has been a dominant bear, but he's not quite the most consistently dominant bear out there on the river. And 503, though he's just a young bear at 9, is quite large for his age. And so as he matures and comes into his prime, we are expecting him only to become a larger bear. And as we speak of the largest bears on the river, we can't forget 856, who consistently for the last decade.
Oh, and I think, yeah, as we get the Wi-Fi signal back from Kim, I think she was going to talk about 856. Yeah, certainly the river's most consistently dominant bear over the last decade. Although last year he took a step back in the hierarchy. He's around 20. He's in his early 20s right now, so it's really hard living on the top of the hierarchy for as long as he had. But he's extremely tough. He's extremely versatile. He must be a really great fighter too. So I'm also interested in seeing how he fits into the hierarchy this year and where that sort of shakes out, because his longtime rival, number 747, displaced him last year. So Kim, we lost your connection for just a second, but I think you were trying to wrap up your conversation or your talk about number 856. You haven't seen him at the river there this year yet, is that correct?
I'm sorry, we must be having technical issues because we can't hear you.
Okay.
Oh, you're back.
All right. So Kim, yes, you were just talking about, wrapping up your conversation or your information about 856. And I was able to, while we were waiting for your signal to come back, I was able to talk a little bit about him and where he's been in the hierarchy over the last few years. But you have not seen 856 at the river yet this year. Is that correct? But you have seen number 747.
I believe there was a brief sighting of 856, but I can't confirm that.
Okay.
But we definitely have seen 747.
All right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to all of these stories sort of playing out. It's really hard to choose what your favorite story might be, because there are so many different ones to try to follow and keep tabs on. The ebb and flow of the hierarchy has always been a fascination for me, and as 856 ages, I'm very interested to see how he again tries to maintain rank when he has a lot of competition from younger bears. And a lot of those playful cubs and subadult bears that that Lian and Chris mentioned, they're one day going to grow large enough to compete for the best fishing spots at Brooks Falls. And that's kind of what we're seeing with 503 and 151 Walker right now, as they're sort of maturing into the prime of their lives. Underlying all of those stories is another subplot of change that we wanted to cover. And I spoke earlier about changes to the salmon run. And the changes are happening to the fish themselves. They're changing to the timing of the run. And this has certainly influenced how bears have used the river. Brooks River is really unique in that bears can fish here during early summer when the salmon are migrating upstream to their spawning sites, as well as bears can fish here in late summer when the salmon are spawning. And when I worked as a ranger at Katmai, a typical pattern of bear activity at Brooks River was basically this. There was a few bears around in June. There were a lot of bears around in July. Sometimes no bears in August. And then lots of bears in September and October. So August was sort of an in-between month when the salmon were largely done migrating, but the water temperatures were not ideal for spawning. So the salmon sort of waited in the lower river, adjacent to Naknek Lake, where the rangers are standing right now, or near the head of the river in Lake Brooks. And by September, as fall approached and the water temperatures cooled, then the salmon began to spawn in large numbers, and the bears returned to scavenge those fish. Since 2016, though, we've seen bears fishing consistently at Brooks Falls through August. And this is a stark change from just 10 years ago. I can remember days in August and weeks in August even where we saw, maybe one or two bears in Brooks River or no bears at Brooks River during that whole entire time. And I think this is the result The change is really the result of increased salmon availability during August. There's really exceptionally large runs of salmon we've seen in the past few years. Is this something that we'll see again this year, especially with another giant salmon run in the forecast? I don't know, but it's another story to follow. Last year, bears fished at Brooks Falls every day from late June until through most of October. And I know of no other place where bears can fish for salmon for so long. So Brooks River is unique and special in so many ways, and a lot of people want to visit it. And rangers, you know this, you've experienced this. More people than ever want to experience this place in all of our national parks. So along with increased popularity comes increased challenges. So Chris, what insider advice do you have and your ranger teammates there have for people who are fortunate enough to visit Brooks River this summer?
Most importantly, I'd say you want to manage your expectations. You can only reach Brooks Camp by float plane or boat, so weather is always a major consideration. Also, despite the new bridge, there have been bear jams that cause delays, and also on the trails if bears decide to sleep there. You want to make sure when you come out here that you know that you cannot have food, drink on you at any time. That includes candy and gum. And this is because we don't want the bears to see us as a source of food or of playthings, because you need to keep your gear at arm's length as well. And this is because the bears see our gear as play stuff, and we need to take advantage of the gear and food cache and put those things up when we get into camp. Also, it's good to know that it is a 1.2-mile walk to the falls, and this is majority dirt road and dirt path, and there are no escorts, no shuttles. So you have to plan on making sure that you can walk that distance round trip. Also, if you want to see bears, I've had really great success at the bridge. Depending on the height of the water season, there's some great platforms. Bears often fish right up against the bridge, and so you can see them from up on top. I've also seen bears on the beach early in the morning. Just make sure that you stay up near the tree line, exit the beach if they come within 50 yards. It's important that we don't come between the bears and their food source. They need to gain as much food and calories as they can before they head into the dens for the winter, as Kim discussed earlier. Also, we want to make sure that we avoid making loud noises, because it changes their behavior, and we don't want to do that. So, but let's be honest, mostly people come to Brooks Camp to see the falls. So why don't we just take a walk together with this pre-recorded video?
Oh, okay. So yeah, we wanted to play a 10-minute video of a walk to the falls, and we'll try to get that later or uploaded either to YouTube or played in another live chat this summer, because it is an exciting walk. It's never the same. It's very unique as well. For such a short trail, there's probably no other trail that's as exciting in our national parks. And Lian, would you sort of agree with that? The walk to the falls is really kind of an amazing, unique experience.
Absolutely. I mean, every time you go around the corner, you just never know what's going to be there. It's a pretty remarkable trail. I mean, it's so short, but just the anticipation of walking that is really exciting too. And you can always see signs of bears. You can see bear scratch trees, you can see fur, you can see the scat, the bear trails, and so you know that you're in the bear habitat. And it's just exciting knowing what is waiting for you.
Yeah, we'll play that video sometime this summer. We're looking forward to sharing it with everybody and sharing that experience of the walk to Brooks Falls. But there's along with that experience though, there's a bit of a regulatory change happening at Brooks River this year, because not only are a lot of people visiting to stand on the platforms and watch bears from Brooks Falls, but more and more people actually want to enter the river itself, and that becomes that's a challenging thing to do. And with more and more people visiting the river, that also risks displacing bears from that habitat overall. So the park is actually taking measures to make sure that people are more informed about that experience. And Kim, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely, Mike. So new this year, Katmai is implementing a pilot permit program for the Brooks River corridor. So that is going to include the river itself and 50 yards on either side of the river. These are going to be, the permits are required between July 1st through October 31st of this year. And any interested parties can obtain them from recreation.gov starting June 28th of this year. We just want to make sure everybody gets online and does them ahead before when they get here and there's not very good service. Many people have been using the Brooks River for fishing, for photography, and of course, as you were mentioning, to witness the bears as they explore their own home. So this permit will help us protect our resources, provide safety for our visitors, and also allow bears that space so they can go to their fishing spots and not be influenced by our human presence. So we are looking forward to that. And while we're on the river, on the topic of river and bears, Mike, it is our 10-year anniversary of the Bearcams. Can you tell us more about any special events that we can expect this season?
Yeah, it's been let's say a memorable and lively set of years on Bearcam. Really, no year is ever the same. So throughout the summer, we're going to post videos reliving some of the most popular moments in Bearcam history. I'm also writing and narrating a series of videos about some of the moments that I thought were most memorable. So those that are most personal, perhaps to me. And then we're going to have a special live event on July 25, the 10-year anniversary of the cams going live. So we're still in the preparation process for that, but I hope to have many special guests involved for that anniversary celebration. And of course, always I'm looking to know what the Bearcams have meant to you watching at home and what your favorite moments are. So we'll be doing a lot of things along those lines. And then of course, the 10th year of Bearcam is going to conclude this year, Lian, with our ultimate event, Fat Bear Week 2022. What's up for that?
Fat Bear Week. Is it ever too early to talk about Fat Bear Week? I don't think so. It is one of my favorite times of year. There's Fat Bear Week and then there's the cams going live, and both of those are celebratory events for sure. And this year, when talking about Fat Bear Week, it is going to be October 5th and then conclude on Fat Bear Tuesday, which is the 11th. And similar to last year, we are also going to do the Fat Bear Junior competition. It's going to be the week before. It's an abbreviated bracket with cubs. And so that date is going to be September 29th and 30th. So be sure to mark your calendars for that. We are going to host all sorts of live programs during that time that we really hope you tune into. And for those who are unfamiliar with Fat Bear Week is essentially a week-long celebration. We pit some of our fattest bears up against each other in a March Madness style bracket, and you ultimately get to crown the Fat Bear champion. And there's absolutely no fat shaming in this. Fat bears are healthy bears, and they are successful bears. And they actually show the healthy ecosystem of Katmai overall. So it's a celebration of bears, it's a celebration of Katmai. It's just a great event overall to get involved in. And last year, thanks to the hard work of everybody at explore.org, thanks to the rangers, and of course the people who voted, we were honored the juried and the People's Choice Webby Award, which is essentially the best of the internet. And it was a great honor for us. It's a great honor for our fat bears. Last year, nearly 800,000 votes were cast during Fat Bear Week. And this year, we are really hoping to break some more records with that. So
I think we need to look for a million.
Your call, okay. Whew. We're putting it out into the universe. But definitely, Fat Bear Week is a great time to join us here at Katmai. And when we think about all of that, though, there is so much between now and then, and we don't want to miss any of that. So, Mike, could you talk a little bit more about our general schedule upcoming for the season?
Of course, we have a lot of live events in store, and this year it's going to be easier than ever to sort of figure out when our live events are. You can check our featured comment, of course, below the live camera feed on the Bearcam pages on explore.org, but there's also a calendar feature that is below the partner tab on the left-hand side of the page. So scroll down below the live camera feed, look at that calendar. It has all of the live events for explore.org listed there, so that's probably the best place to go. Next week, Wednesday, same bear time, same bear channel. Chris, I think it's you and I and Leon, we are going to be talking about bear hunger and how that drives and motivates bears. That's right. Next Wednesday, if I remember right.
That's correct.
All right, great. Glad we could get that confirmation so I didn't mix up the topics. And we also have plenty of Q&As that we'll be doing twice weekly starting next week. There's an opportunity to ask us questions in the chat, in the comments below the live camera feed on Tuesdays, and then we'll be in the YouTube chat on the Brooks Falls page on Fridays, excuse me. And then the park website, of course, is a great place to go if you're looking for more information, nps.gov/KATM. Look for the Bears of Brooks River ebook, which is an amazing resource on the individual bears that use the river. You can download that off of Katmai National Park's website. The Bearcam wiki is maintained by a dedicated set of hardcore Bearcam fans, and I use it as a resource all the time. So thanks to them, and if you're curious about the nuances of the bear lives, the Bearcam Wiki is a great place to go. Find that by searching Bearcam Katmai Wiki in the search engine. I'd like to thank our camera operators, of course, who devote so much time, so much of their free time to driving the cameras and showing us these amazing scenes, and all the staff at explore.org. And of course, thanks to the Rangers today for the conversation. Rangers, it's been so great to talk with you, and I'm really excited for what the summer can bring this year.
Always a pleasure.
My co-hosts for our first Bearcam live chat of 2022 have been Kim Grossman, Chris Kliesrath, and Lian. Brooks River and Brooks Falls are exceptionally special places. While we watch the Bearcams, we'll witness many stories that showcase how bears and salmon live in a changing, competitive world, one where survival and success are not guaranteed. And I'm so glad we're going to be able to share it with you. So happy 10th anniversary to the Bearcams this summer. My name is Mike Fitz with explore.org. And be sure to check out all of our live events this year. And remember, as we like to say at Explore, never stop learning.